Morning, Atopa. We are very honored and very humbled to share with you the work that we've been working on for the past 5 or so weeks. My name is Mubarak Wantimba. I'm from Kampala, Uganda. I have a passion for programming and technology, and I was responsible for the back end of this project.
Good morning. My name is Rani Shokago from Nairobi, Kenya, and I am passionate about software engineering in general, but being a stylish lady that I am, I developed the front-end part of the HealthBridge. So what's in HealthBridge? HealthBridge is an hospital management system. So maybe you're there wondering, of all the projects, why did we go for an hospital management system? But 2 years ago, witnessing the struggles that my aunt went through when I took her to the hospital for her monthly checkups on her 7 months of pregnancy, and seeing the misunderstandings and all the confusion it caused just because she didn't have her medical records with her while at the hospital, it actually inspired me to want to come up with the solution for that, to have all these in one place. And that's how HealthBridge came in mind.
Wow. What a story. And indeed, that is the story of most Africans. And in fact, according to research that was made by the World Health Organization, less than 10% of Africans actually have access to proper medical records. With the problem set, we needed to use the skills that we've acquired over the past couple of months to actually come up with a solution to this problem. And for that, we needed to design an architecture, and we went for the client-server architecture. We went for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery in the front end, and in the back end, we went for MySQL database. We went for a JSON file storage. We went for a layer of abstraction in MySQL Alchemy. We served our content via the Flask web server, and we also exposed an API, an internal API, for us to be able to do our write, update, and delete requests.
Yeah, and as Mubarak has said, the construction of our interface was done through HTML and CSS. And as you can see, the first structure of HTML, this is just a part of the patient page, the patient management page. And as you can see, it only shows us the header parts, some of the header parts which we came up with, the things that you're gonna see on the top of the screen when you go to our application. But with the HTML structure, it's only words. So how did we style it? We needed the CSS, and that's where this CSS comes into, because we needed a structure to style our structure. And as you can see, it also shows the part for the header parts, how we styled our header parts. And now we only have an interface, but now we need an application. How did we have a running application? We needed the APIs, and that's where Mubarak came into.
Indeed, Fabrizia, that is very correct. We had to set up a storage engine. But what is a storage engine without a schema? We came up with, during our design process, we came up with a schema, and we did the mapping in SQL Alchemy. We needed that layer of abstraction to make it easier for us to now connect the database and the application. And on screen is one of our most important classes, the patient class. I mean, this is a hospital. So that is one of the, as you can see, the attributes of the patient, or the information that is actually required: biodata, some clinical notes, and contact information. From there, we had to now connect. If you could go back to the previous slide, thank you. We had to now connect our mapping. We now had to establish the mapping in the database. So we needed to connect our application layer, the abstraction layer, and the actual database. And for that, on line 30, we created an engine, the connection. As you can see, there is the database, the server running on port 306, and some of the methods that actually implement the database storage. However, it's not the only one that we did. We also did file storage. We can proceed to Fabrizia. Now that we have the storage engine in place, it is now time to bring Fabrizia's work and my work into play. And for that, we needed a web server. We used the Flask to implement this. And that is one of the routes that we did, the pharmacy routes. the pharmacy routes, and on line 52, we are actually sourcing drug information from the database and rendering it to the front end. In the pharmacy, on line 59, you have the pharmacy page.html. So we are now starting to render, and that's when things start getting quite interesting. Next up, we went for the API. Remember, with the Flask server, all we could do is just source this data from the database, from our storage engine to the front end, onto the interface, but we needed a way of being able to write. We needed a way of being able to update. We needed a way of being able to create. And that is where the API came in. So as you can see on screen on line 11, 12, the payments route, which we implement that payment gateway in those lines of code. Get requests, push request, put, delete. I mean, all operations, RESTful API operations.
Yeah, and now that we had the APIs that we needed, now it was time to consume them. And we used JavaScript to consume the APIs from the backend. As you can see in line 13, we're actually making a post request. And in line 19, we're showing you the route that it will be run into. So after the APIs are there, we had to consume them to the front end parts. And that's how now we brought the live to our liveless interface. But now, how were all this possible? We had to go through challenges.
Fabrizia, I think so. There were multiple challenges, but before we go to the challenges, there was a process that you need to go through.
Yeah, so we had to go through the process, and we had like 6 processes. First of all, we had to plan. There's nothing that can work without planning. So we had to plan, know the user requirements, know everything that our project would be needing. And after planning, we had to analyze and see of all these things that we have discovered, which ones are we going to use? After analyzing everything, we had to come up with a design for our application, see how it will look. And that's where we came up with the schema and also the user interface. All the interfaces, we designed them there. Now that we have the design in mind, we had now to implement, come to see how our application will look in real life, not only in design. So that's where we started coding, and all the snippets you have shown behind, we coded them. And after coding, we had to test, are we really on the rightful track? So we tested everything. And after testing everything and rectifying the errors we found in testing, now we were ready for deployment. And that now was the last stage where we deployed our application.
The process wouldn't have been possible, wouldn't have gone through all that without collaboration. If you could go to the slide of collaboration, Fabrizia. We needed to collaborate. I live in Kampala, Fabrizia lives in Nairobi. So we needed to have proper mechanisms. So for that, we looked for the Trello to manage our time very well, and we do daily stand-up. Sometimes we go up to 10 hours. Now, for the version control and the code repository, we went for JIT and we would use task branching, do daily meetups, and try to review our codes, make pull requests, and match. And that's how we're able to actually come up with the code.
Yeah, so we had the collaborations, but then we also had the challenges. We went through challenges, both technical and non-technical, and Mubarak will take us through the technical challenges.
One of the biggest challenges that we got early on, remember, we are building for the first time, we have never built, and we have been learning all this time, and we are now bringing live. We are now starting to use what we've been learning. So one of the biggest challenges that we got is around cross-origin sharing. Now, we were naive enough not to know that actually they're making a request from the browser. The browsers have inbuilt security systems that do not allow to make cross-domain kinds of communications. So we spent about 48 hours after building the API. We spent about 48 hours trying to consume our API. And however, we did research and found out that Flask Cores is a utility, very powerful utility in Python that can actually allow you to do this. Now, testing this many tests, humongous number of tests, very many tests, and we had limited time. So we had to look to our colleagues, ask them what they're doing, try to collaborate with them, try to understand, and share most of those common tests, especially the storage engine kind of parts. And then during the process, we also found out that there are multiple automated tools that you can use. And we came across GitHub Copilot, quite interesting. I think we shall continue trying to test it.
Yeah, and apart from the technical challenges, we also had non-technical challenges. As Mubarak has said, we live from 2 different places, and we also have 2 different schedules. We are 2 different people with their own schedule. So coming up with a time that we're going to perfect both of us wasn't that easy, but with the help of things like Trello, and also communication was our best key. And we had meetups every day, so that one really helped us, though it was a challenge. So after doing all these projects, the project actually improves my interest in front-end developing, and I just liked front-end developing very much.
Well, for me, I'm sort of logical, and I like playing with things around, and the back end is surely something that I'm looking forward to doing in the next 3 or so months.
Okay, so now that we have taken you through that, now it's time to get into the real application. So first of all, as a patient, to get into the hospital, first you need to do an appointment. So how did we do that? We go to, we actually make the appointments in the Calendly. We used Calendly to make our appointments. Okay. So when you go to Calendly as a patient, you go to make appointments. It is under HealthBridge. So it is calendly.com HealthBridge. Then you make an appointment. You choose the time that's perfect with you as a patient. Enter your name. And also your email. Then you schedule event. So after scheduling the event, what's next? If you go to the hospital now, our application, which is this one, and you come to the appointments. Here it is. The record is there, my appointment. So after the appointments, what's the next stage? Mubarak will take us through that one.
Now that we have the stage set, Fabricia, if you could kindly unshare your screen so I can share. Now that the stage has been set and the patient in the hospital, we now need to take information. Now, this meeting can either be physical or a non-physical meeting. As you saw in the previous, as you saw in the previous video, as you saw in this part of the video, as you saw in this part, we now have the appointments and we have the client. The client has made an appointment and we are the hospital. So now that we have the patient record here, it can either be a physical meeting, or if not, it can be a Google Meet meeting. It can be. So by pressing here, would definitely take us to the Google Meet. And because I already have the details of the patient, the meeting can be online. Now that solves a big problem. The problem around telemedicine and having to make all of these visits for things like diabetes, for things like hypertension, where those chronic kinds of diseases that people have to come to hospital all the time. Now that the patient is in, whether it's a virtual via telemedicine or not, we can now be able to get their information, whether in a physical meeting or a non-physical meeting. So the patient is Fabricia Renish. It's now Venucavo. Can you use this? That's a 20,000 in the month of July of September in the past. The age auto computes. Gender is female. Address is Nairobi, Kenya. contact. Let's just take an example of 254 something. Just time. Let's say the email is fabricia@gmail.com. Clinical notes. Let's assume this patient is suffering from pelvic inflammatory disease, some pelvic kind of disease. And it's now time to make the call to the API. And as you can see, the record has been created. So what if a mistake has been made and maybe we need to add in some extra medication to prescribe for this patient? We can now go back and edit. Taking a little too long. My internet connection is unstable a bit. Sorry, guys. Okay, yeah, it is. So as you can see, this time around, it has auto-filled the form, and all I need to do is put some medication. Let's say this patient is going to be on cefixime, and this patient is also going to be on paracetamol for 7 days. 7 days. And then submit. As you can see, it has updated. So now time to do the prescriptions. Now that we know the disease and we also have the medication, it's now time to do the prescriptions. Sorry about that, taking quite too long, unexpectedly. So we have cefixime. We can now search. We are now in prescriptions. We can actually search the medications and see whether we actually have them. By doing suffix, we actually have the drug, so we can add it to the patient. And as you can see, we have actually added it. Let's add another drug, Actinac. Sorry about my connection, unexpectedly slow. There we are. So we have Actinac. Make it, but then we remember, okay, it was paracetamol. Both have painkillers, but it was paracetamol, so we can actually delete this. And there it goes just like that. So we can add the paracetamol that we wanted, but we have paracetamol, we can search for the drug. Oh, actually, we don't have paracetamol, we have Dynamo Extra. But then we remember that there was some inventory that came in yesterday, and we hadn't yet really entered the drug. So we can come and get the drug. So it's paracetamol. Paracetamol is a cheap drug. Let's say it's 500 shillings, and the quantity is like 1,000 units. Okay, so we can submit. And as you can see, paracetamol has actually been added. So we can go back to our patient and actually prescribe this drug. So in the patient list, do we have Melvin Okago? Yes, the record is already there. But what if we don't want to go through the entire, what if we have 1,000 patients in the list? So what we can do is just come, check out Melvin, press enter, and indeed Melvin has come. So we can go back directly to their records. We know that doctors do not have a lot of time to waste. And for that, yeah, that can be very, very disturbing. So let me just fix this here. Reach, check access, protect. The connection is a little bit slow, please forgive me.
Okay, Mubarak, maybe you can share your screen so that I can take over from there.
Okay, so now as you can see, we are back now. Let me unshare my screen for this. Back to the meeting. Control up here. Okay. Okay, you can take over for this.
Okay, so the final parts, we've already created the patient, but we have given the patient the prescription as Mubarak has given it. So what about the payments? The prescriptions are included at the services. So the payments, you can go there now, enter the payments. You create, let's say the total amount of the patient, maybe it has cost 1,000, but the patient has not paid everything. Let's say the patient has only managed to pay 500. So when you submit, you can see the patient name is Melvin, the amount paid, and you can also see there the balance. And now if you edit it,
Patricia, click on Melvin, the name to edit.
yeah,
No. Below.
sorry about that. Let me,
It's okay.
okay, so when you come here, let's say the patient has come and completed the payment to 1,000. Now when you submit,
So payment updated down here, just scroll down.
yeah, payment updated. So now when you go back to the patient,
you
can see that now the balance is 0, so it automatically calculates itself. So what if the patient has come more than 2 times in your hospital and you forgot and put another name? Like, for example, you can see we have 2 Najib Mutiaba, the Najib Abdallah. So you have 2 patients with the same name and it's the same patient. So what do? You just delete one of the records. And when you delete it and come back here, you see now we only have 1 Najib. Yeah. So that's actually the live demo of our application, how it works.
Thank you very much for taking over.
As it is said, kilicho na mwanzo lazima kiwe na mwisho. That's a Swahili saying that means what begins must have an end. So now we are done with our presentation. The floor is open for any adjustments and any communications from you.
So thank you so much for that presentation. First thing I'd like to say, I think this is the best presentation I've seen from a team project. In the sense that you guys actually did the presentation together, split down the work. It came out as an organized group, so that was really nice to see, and it shows that you guys have learned how to collaborate and work together really well. Okay, so thank you for that. So is there anyone with a question? So we have a couple of people in the call. Is there anyone with a question? Yeah, I see Boniface says they have also enjoyed your collaborative skills and they've learned a lot from you. So yeah, this just shows how wonderful you guys were probably working together. I have a question. So just by looking at your presentation, I've actually accessed the application. So whose screen is sharing it now? Fabrice's, right? Are you on the patient's page?
Yes.
So I see you're using a domain name here. And when Mubarak was sharing, he was using like an IP address and port 5000. So I accessed the IP address, and I'm not sure if it's the same website or what, or it's not. But when I accessed the one on the IP address, I was also able to edit a patient, Alfred, when I'm in Kenya. So don't you guys think that this is a security issue? If someone just gets access to your domain name, they'll be able to change records, even do something malicious on your site.
Fabricia, can I take that one? Or can you take that one?
You can go ahead. It's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Alfred. Well, that is a big security issue, and indeed, the login is one of the things that we are going to implement right after this program. For purposes of demonstration, we looked at it and said, okay, let us demonstrate this product, but we have to implement a login structure. Now, we would have wanted to include a login structure very early on, but one of the things you realize is that to create an account, you must have privileges. It is not that every user can actually come and create an account, but rather there has to be some privileges. For example, the health workers within the organization are allowed to, so it's not very open. So yes, there is a real security issue, and we really, really appreciate that you've pointed that out. Thank you very much, Mr. Alfred.
Okay, so you guys can look into that. One workflow I can think of the top of my head is maybe you have one person in a clinic create an account, and every other person they want to add under their account, they have to be invited into their account. They're sent an email and given login access. So that's one way of probably doing it. Okay, so anyone else with a question in the call? Anyone with a question? I see there's no question. Okay, so this was a really nice presentation, and I like how you worked. You've shown us a working application, and you also do have plans to improve it. You also hosted the website. I always say that we should host our portfolio projects because it becomes easier for when you want to share what you're doing with other people. So what I'd say is also maybe talk a little bit more about it, you know, on Slack, on Twitter, any social media platform you're using. Just talk about what you're building so that people can see what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're learning. So I don't have any other question. Is there a question for me?
Yes, Mr. Alfred, there's a question for you.
Okay, yeah.
I've had issues around Flask and how it scales. So we think with Fabricia that if we worked a little bit more, we could actually, since we are going into specializations and she's going to learn React, I'm going to learn a bit of Node.js, and more skills about session management and all of this. So I'm thinking, is it worthy for us to continue building Flask, or can we re-implement it in like Django or something else?
Good question. Let me find. There is someone. So I don't know where you guys are learning Flask from, but there's someone called Miguel Greenberg. He's a really huge Flask advocate. And the thing is, this discussion has been around for a really long time, but the consensus has been that any tech stack, any language, any framework can actually scale. You just have to figure out how to do it. The issue of scaling is not a framework or language issue, it's a design issue, how you design your applications. So yes, there are very big applications that run on Flask. So it's definitely possible for you to keep on working on Flask with this and actually make it work. Let me share this guy's website. Let me just share that in the chat. You can just, he has so many articles and tutorials, and usually talks about scaling in Flask and how you might approach it. So Miguel Greenberg, so you can read more about it, but I feel like you can still work with Flask and build a robust application. You don't have to switch to a new framework or something else. But yeah, if you want to do it for the learning process, then go ahead, because sometimes we love to do that. You build an application with a different tech stack, you learn something new and you want to try it out with something else. So go ahead and do that. But yes, Flask can scale. It's the design, how you design it, how you write your code. Because what is it like? What do they say? I think the weakest point of an application is actually you, the human. So how you code, how you design everything is what's going to limit you. So if you have a really good design and you code really well, it's going to work out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alfred.
And Mr. Alfred, apart from the security issue, is there any other thing you'll advise us to do to improve our application?
Nothing comes to mind right now. You do not have SSL despite having a domain name, so there's that. You need to implement to add an SSL certificate to your website because it says not secure there at the top. I'm pretty sure when someone tries accessing it in some websites, they'll probably get a warning. But this looks pretty nice, everything else, and I really like this. So keep up the good work. Anyone else with a comment, feedback? Doesn't even have to be a question. If you'd like to suggest something to them, because that's the point of these calls. If you feel like there's something they could have done better, you can suggest now. Anyone else with something? We have around 10 people in the call. Okay, I guess everyone agrees that this is good and no one has a question or any feedback. But yeah, so this is brilliant. I'd advise you keep on working on this. It has the potential of being monetized. So keep working on it, improving it, and also learning in the process. Okay, so thank you. Since you don't have any questions, we're going to end this call now.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Najib.
Yeah, so have a nice day.
Have a
Yes,
nice
sir.
day.